Today, I want to talk about Aristotle's writing method. Aristotle, born in ancient Greece, was a prominent philosopher of his time. His work covered politics, ethics, physics, logic, and this writing method we're about to discuss is how he would structure and organize his papers. I wanted to dive into this a little bit because the same structure that he uses for writing can be taken and then applied to creating art. And in a little bit here, I'll show you what I mean. So how does it work? So there are three main components. First, we have the introduction. Second, we have the body. And then thirdly, we've got the conclusion of the paper. All pretty straightforward so far. So I'm going to cover the purpose behind each of these sections, and after that, I'm going to show how this relates to creating art. The introduction begins by describing all of the words in the title and then defines them. At the beginning of this video, for example, you saw me describe who Aristotle was, and then you saw me describe what a writing method was. The reason for these descriptions is so that we can introduce our topic that's found in the title. The second thing that the introduction does is that it allows us to introduce our thesis. You can think of the thesis as a focal point in which we address our topic from. It's the perspective or the argument that we're addressing the topic with. Lastly, the introduction introduces each part that's going to be covered in the paper. So each part of the body section gets mentioned within the introduction. Moving into the body of the paper, we have several sections, each of which carry their own subsequent idea, and each section's job is to argue or present information that supports the thesis. So the thesis is there to address the topic, and the body is essentially there to back up the thesis. Each section of the body is there to bring some argument, some rationale, to give weight to the thesis's point. So just as an example, let's say that my topic was the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age was a term coined by Mark Twain. It described a phenomenon where gold was wrapped around something that was rotting inside. Twain explained the Gilded Age as an era where there was both booming wealth as well as mass disparity between lesser classes. Now let's say that my thesis is about how the robber barons were responsible for causing the Gilded Age. So a few ideas that I might select to support this thesis would be something in the line of how the government system allowed the robber barons to do what they were doing. I could then talk about how the system works, how it came into being, and how it allowed them to have free reign to take over. Another section I could talk about is how the robber barons were in a very competitive competition with one another. Each of the barons working to try to become the richest man in America while harming the workers underneath them to attain that goal. But let's say instead I started talking about something different. For example, let's say I started talking about the immigration of the time and how that was affecting things. Unless I somehow find a way to connect this to the robber barons, I'm diverging from my thesis. This section of the body would not be supporting my thesis, but instead going off on its own little tangent. And in effect, that information would get shoehorned in without any real point to it. So again, you need to remember, each section of the body carries an idea that supports the thesis. And if that's not what's happening, you may want to consider reworking it a bit. And finally, we have our conclusion. This is where everything gets brought together. The conclusion is a summary of all the most important ideas and how they support your thesis. So you can reapply this writing method to structure the ideas that you want to make within your artwork. The big difference is that within art, it's more about expressing a scene than it is winning over an argument. So instead of using a bunch of different ideas to back up your thesis, you'll instead be working with a theme that's being addressed by a central message of some kind. The overall theme is very similar to the topic. It again is the overall idea or concept that's getting explored. For example, one theme for a song could be a love song. Now the central message is equivalent to the thesis. This is the core message or takeaway that's being explored. And what it does is that it encapsulates the key point of emotion that the songwriter wants to express. So if the central message is addressing the topic of a love song, it could be one about heartbreak, it could be one about the joys of long-lasting love, and so on and so on. Just like a thesis, it can address the same topic from many different perspectives and many different angles. So in order for a core message to express the right emotions that it's focusing on, it needs to be supported by several elements to help it make its point. And these elements are made up of whatever means that the art medium has available at its disposal. So to take painting for an example, you have size, you have shape, you have colors, you have color palettes, you've got all kinds of elements that are going to be there to help you express the right emotions to support your core message. But again, just like the body of an essay, you're using these elements to back up the core message. So if I were to write a song that wanted to capture the emotion of heartbreak, I'm probably not going to want to go to some happy, positive key to do it. You would want to find one that helps further the emotional point that you're trying to make. So to wrap things up here, you're not trying to encompass everything that the topic is. You're trying to address the topic through a one-pointed perspective. You can of course address the same topic through many different perspectives, but one per essay. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it'll help you in your writing. And if nothing else, understanding this writing method should help you understand any other papers that you come across. And I hope I was able to highlight how it has more of a universal view in ways it can be applied to not just writing, but to other mediums as well.